Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajacharya Aristosara Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shai Mukunda Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we're continuing with the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 3, and today we'll be embarking upon Chapter 3, entitled New Jagannath Puri. That was a name that Srila Prabhupada gave to San Francisco, because it was there that Srila Prabhupada initiated the Ratha Yatra festival. We're just completing the second chapter entitled The Price Affair. You can remember Prabhupada was trying like anything to get a very attractive temple in New York City. But the realtor and the lawyers were cheating the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada now has written a letter. Srila Prabhupada wrote almost daily to various devotees in New York. On February 18th, he wrote a letter to Brahmananda with the word confidential typed at the top of the page. See, because every time Srila Prabhupada wrote to the devotees, everyone would share the letters with everybody else, because they took it to be instructions for everyone, because they were like a nice family working together. But this particular letter, Prabhupada wanted it just for Brahmananda. So he typed, confidential. This is what Prabhupada had to say. How do we? Prabhuji, वो जो पूरा पेज कैसे दिखाना? ठीक है. Anyway. This is what Prabhupada wrote confidentially to Brahmananda. Now, if you think he, meaning Mr. Price, is able to secure money for us, Mr. Price had promised that his friend, who he said was a great humanitarian, was going to just give $100,000 for the devotees to buy a temple. Prabhupada didn't believe it at all. That there is something hopeful by this time, then you can continue the negotiation as he is doing. But do not, for Krishna's sake, advance a farthing more on any plea by him. He may be trying his best, but he is not capable to do this. That is my honest opinion. So the devotees, Prabhupada had deposited $5,000 that he had saved most earnestly by his book sales, by his donations. People would give $4 or $5, $3 every night. And then the devotees got another $5,000 from a hippie who wanted to help Srila Prabhupada. So out of that $5,000, Brahmananda, to show his earnestness, gave Mr. Price $1,000, though he did absolutely nothing. While trying to avoid further losses in New York, Prabhupada continued his active preaching in San Francisco. Mukunda and the others were lining up lots of engagements, and the reception was often enthusiastic. In the same confidential letter to Brahmananda, in which Prabhupada put forward his strategies for negotiating with Mr. Price and company, he also wrote glowingly of grand successful meetings at various Bay Area colleges. The meetings were similar, he said, to the wonderful kirtans in Tompkins Square Park. This was the way to spread Krishna consciousness, not by becoming entangled with treacherous real estate agents. So Srila Prabhupada had a formula, and that formula was, he would have kirtan. This is his classes, this is his outdoor engagements. You have kirtan, let's say for half an hour. And then you have a lecture. Prabhupada generally would never lecture more than half an hour. If he had tapes that were 45 minutes, then he would lecture for 45 minutes. But Srila Prabhupada understood that due to the alpametasa of the living entities in Kali Yuga, they didn't have much of an attention span beyond half an hour. So he would lecture for half an hour. So kirtan, lecture, then another kirtan, and then prasad distribution. So this was the formula that we followed all over ISKCON as it expanded. It's still going on. We're still doing it anytime we go to preaching programs. And it was very effective because some people appreciated the kirtans, some people appreciated the philosophy, and some people appreciated the prasadam. So they would wait till the end for the prasadam. So Prabhupada was giving very specific instructions to Brahmananda that this is our program. We preach, and from that preaching we become successful. Not that we become entangled with treacherous real estate agents. Prabhupada, he was a very experienced and learned businessman. He had set up his business all over India, and he knew how to judge people according to what their capacities were. And he saw right through Mr. Price. He knew that Mr. Price would never come through, and these poor boys were just getting cheated. I am enclosing herewith a copy of the letter received from Himalayan Academy. See how they are appreciating our method of peace movement. So in this way, we have to forward our cause. No businessman will come forward to help us on utopian schemes as contemplated by Mr. Price. We have to try for ourselves. So the summary is to obtain a hire purchase sale contract. Now, Brahmananda didn't know what that meant. Prabhupada understood what it meant. From Mr. Tyler, he was the lawyer, the advocate, and popularize our movement by outdoor engagements, as many as possible. So Srila Prabhupada, being very astute in business matters, he knew how to get through this, but he also realized that these poor boys had already sunk $1,000 into a useless endeavor just by the utopian promises that Mr. Price was giving the boys. Mr. Price never had any intention of allowing the devotees to get, nor did the devotees have the money. It was $100,000. They had $10,000. So they were being utopian, that means impractical, and Mr. Price was taking advantage of their naivety. Prabhupada saw all that. Srila Prabhupada had done what he could. The boys were foolish, even to the point of not listening to him. But they had raised the money themselves. If despite his instructions they lost it, what further help could he give? So he simply went on with his San Francisco preaching and advised the boys in New York also to become convinced of achieving success through kirtan. That was our strength, kirtan. And Prabhupada will see in the coming volumes, as Prabhupada expands the movement, several times he became disappointed with the devotees because they would not listen to him. Sometimes he had to completely disassemble the entire management structure and rebuild it because they were straying off in the wrong direction. And here we have a perfect example, the first example of Prabhupada giving advice, but unfortunately the devotees did not follow it. So what could Prabhupada do? He was 3,000 miles away. That's about 5,000 kilometers away. He couldn't fly back and forth like that. He was there in San Francisco, so he continued with his preaching activities and prayed to Krishna that these foolish boys would follow his advice. Now we're starting the new chapter, New Jagannath Puri. At this point in time, we don't know why Srila Prabhupada named the temple New Jagannath Puri, but most of us have heard these stories already about how the first Jagannath deities were discovered. They were recarved big size by Shamsundar, and they started in 1967 the first Rath Yatra and have continued it since then. Now even in San Francisco there is an official holiday called Rath Yatra Day, because tens of thousands of people take part in this Rath Yatra festival now. It goes through the entire Golden Gate Parkway, and thousands upon thousands of people are fed prasadam on that day, get to take part in the kirtan, in pulling the ropes, and get purified. Srila Prabhupada put on a sweater over his turtleneck jersey, wrapped his chadar around his shoulders, and left his apartment, accompanied by a few disciples. This is in the morning. The weather was beautiful, and the blue, cloudless sky reminded him of India. Now, in America, I know when I used to go visit America, because we have so much abundant sunlight here in India, everything is so bright. And when you go to America, everything becomes gloomy. I couldn't see anymore because my eyes were so, they were so accustomed to the brightness of the sun here in India. So, but in California, that's called the Sunshine State, they have sunshine over there. And that's why so many people choose to live in California, because of the nice weather. Not too hot, not too cold, beautiful sunshine, the ocean, forests, so many attractive things, big cities with a lot of culture. So Prabhupada, seeing this as an opportunity for preaching, he found new ways to expand there in San Francisco. An hour before, he had sent devotees ahead to start a kirtan. And now one of the girls had come running back to him, excitedly knocking on his door, announcing, "Swamiji, there are so many people." Well, that's because Prabhupada sent them to the Golden Gate Parkway, the Golden Gate Park, and there in Golden Gate Park, we'll see the maps, there's Hippie Hill, and the hippies just camp out there. So when Prabhupada sent the devotees ahead to start the kirtan party, the crowd was already there. They just had to start chanting, and then all of the young people who were staying there at Hippie Hill, they took part in the kirtan. So it was perfect setup. The clay mrdangas he had ordered many months ago from Calcutta had recently arrived. Today would be one of the first times he would play a genuine clay mrdanga in America. The boys and girls would like it. He had arranged for the drum to be wrapped in cloth and had cautioned the boys to be careful because the clay drums broke easily. So this we learned, the etiquette for taking care of the mrdanga. The mrdanga is considered to be conscious, a conscious living entity who takes part in the kirtan, and should always be covered, wrapped properly for protection. But the boys at that time did not understand, and therefore in this picture there isn't a covering. The walk to the park was short, and as usual, Prabhupada walked faster than his young followers. They walked down Frederick Street to Stanyan. I don't know if you can see, Stanyan is the long street there, and Frederick Street goes across. So Prabhupada went down Frederick and went up Stanyan, where they turned the corner at the donut shop, frequented by the hells, sometimes visited by certain devotees. So because it was still vegetarian, the devotees felt that they could still engage in their sense gratification of donuts and ice cream at the donut shop. So yes, Satrup Maharaj mentions this, that sometimes some of the devotees would still go to the donut shop. On Stanyan, they hurried past the parking lot of Kezar Stadium. So you can easily see that parking lot there, and this is the big sports stadium. The stadium itself looming beyond. At the Waller Street intersection, that's up here, well, we'll see, okay. Prabhupada continued his rapid stride without stopping or even bothering to look at the light. One of the boys caught his arm. "Wait, Swamiji, the light." But Prabhupada darted across the street. Now, the traffic rules are strict in the West. And they're strict because they don't want people to get harmed. And in some countries, like one time we were preaching in Germany, they have cameras at every intersection, watching to see if anyone dares to cross the street when the light is red. And then you get a ticket. It's called jaywalking. So Prabhupada, of course, was from India. It's the biggest democracy in the world. And there were no such things as traffic lights. If there were, they didn't work. And there was no such thing as jaywalking. You had to take your life in your hands sometimes to cross the street in Bombay and Delhi. So Prabhupada was very expert. No, he lived at Chandichok. Just to get across Chandichok, you're taking your life in your hands sometimes. So Prabhupada really knew how to do this. But the boys, they understood that police were watching. So they tried to stop Prabhupada. He had already crossed the street. As they continued down Stanyan toward Haight Street, the park appeared on the right. They entered, walking past a duck pond with a fountain and a willow tree on its center island. I think we heard last week about the ducks, that when the devotees walked past the ducks, well, the ducks were being disturbed by the devotees because the devotees were trying to shoo the ducks out of the way. And Prabhupada explained that just as we're being disturbed by them, they're being disturbed by us. After all, this is their pond. You know, they live here. So when Prabhupada entered the park, the first place they came to was the duck pond. they walked past tall red eucalyptus trees. So here we have eucalyptus trees. We have them all along the Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg up to Chattikara Road. But here, they're very straight and tall and very fragrant also. But in California, the eucalyptus trees, because of the weather, hurricanes, and different influences from the ocean, they have bent limbs, and the leaves are different. They're all eucalyptus, and because Prabhupada, he wouldn't use a toothbrush, he would use danta. So in America, you don't have neem trees. So the devotees would take the eucalyptus twigs and cut them. They had to be a specific width, and they would take we used to do this for Prabhupada. You take one end of it and you take a stone, like from the shield bhatta, the upper stone, and you crush the tip of it so it becomes like a toothbrush. And that's what Prabhupada would use for his toothbrush. So he had to use these eucalyptus trees. When he was traveling all around America, they would mail him the eucalyptus twigs because he couldn't get the neem twigs here. Now, redwood trees. Redwood trees, they live up to 5,000 years, or even longer. Some of the trees in California were present when Krishna was on the planet. And they're so wide, you can imagine 5,000-year-old tree, that they build tunnels through the center of the tree, and cars go through the tunnels to get to the other side of the tree. All along the coastal area, there's a national highway called Route 1, the scenic highway. You see these forests of ancient redwood trees. So some of them, although they didn't get to have darshan maybe of Krishna, but they were present when Krishna was here. There were also maple, oak, and ash trees and flowering shrubs like azaleas. Prabhupada said that the park resembled parks in Bombay, and that the city was like a holy place because it was named after Saint Francis. So San Francisco, that's named after one of the very loving and affectionate saint called Saint Francis. So that also Los Angeles, because what happened in California and other parts of the south part of America is the indigenous people in South America, like in Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, and all of the whole continent of South Africa, they had their own culture, they had their own religion, they worshipped demigods, specifically the sun god, the Mayans, the Aztecs. It was all coming from the Vedic culture. In fact, there's a tunnel from Sri Lanka. There's a tunnel that goes straight through the earth, and the entrance to that tunnel is in South America. And that's how they used to transport their gold, because there was a lot of gold in South America. So because of the wealth of South America, the colonials in Europe, they were trying to get a short route to India, because India was the wealthiest country in the entire planet. But in order to get to India in those days, in the 1500s, you had to go all the way around Africa. And then they got the idea that the earth being round, if we just go this way, we'll reach India. They didn't know that in between Europe and India, there was a whole other continent of America, North America and South America. So when they reached America, they thought they had gotten to India. And that's why the Native Americans are called Indians. They're called American Indians because they thought it was India that they had reached. So all of these colonizers from Spain, from Portugal, from Netherlands, from England, they were trying to get to India, but they bumped into America, and they started to colonize all of the people in America. And in South America, especially the Spaniards killed all of the priests and the warriors because they had guns, and the Indians didn't have guns. So they could easily kill everybody, and took over the whole continent and forced them to accept Christianity and forced them to speak Spanish also, except for Brazil, they speak Portuguese. So the Spanish culture and the Christian culture, Spanish language and Christian culture spread up into America as well, because the Spaniards also, they had control of Florida and Mississippi. They were colonists. They were trying to pull all the wealth from these countries and bring it back to Europe. So that's why in California you have San Diego, that means, Diego means God, and then Los Angeles, the city of the angels, San Francisco, named after Saint Francis, like that. It was all names given by the Spaniards when they had conquered that area. They entered a 50-foot-long tunnel with artificial stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Stalactites is when you have a real cave, the mineral deposits drip down and create like icicles made out of minerals, lime or whatever it is. But because this was an artificial tunnel, they made artificial stalactites to make it look like a real tunnel. Came out onto a path heavily shaded by trees on either side. Just ahead was the meadow, covered with tiny daisies and clover, and encircled by redwood and eucalyptus trees. So this is the meadow, right? Prabhupada could hear the chanting, the kartals, and the booming of the timpani. Timpani, we remember, is that huge drum that Mukunda used to play. As he entered the meadow, he saw a sloping hill dotted with hundreds of young people. It was early in the morning, and you throw it like a ball, and someone catches it. It's just a game, that's all. Or walking around, and in the meadow below the hill was his kirtan. This is Hippie Hill. The meadow was a popular place. People walked through it on the way to the zoo or the tennis courts. But today many passers-by had stopped and were listening in a group about 200 feet from the kirtan. Closer in, about 50 feet from the kirtan, was another group, listening more intently. And then there was the kirtan party itself, Prabhupada's disciples and dozens of young hippies, sitting tightly together and chanting. And others were standing nearby, clapping and swaying to the rhythm of the drum and kartals. So because Allen Ginsberg, he had already popularized the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra all over the country, the hippies were already accustomed to the mantra. Although he had his own tune and his own way of chanting Hare Krishna, it was still the all-potent Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So when the devotees went there for kirtan, everywhere, big hundreds of people, some very close, taking part, some watching, and some lounging in the background. And this was Prabhupada's purpose, that before he arrived, he sent the devotees ahead of him to start this kirtan. We heard 2 weeks ago that the devotees, they sewed 3 big flags. One flag had the crescent and the moon of the Muslim faith. One had the Star of David of the Jewish faith. And one, this yellow one with red, had the Omkar sign on it. So that, and they put this up, these big flags next to Prabhupada, they put them up where they had the kirtan so that everyone could understand that this was non-sectarian, it's for people of all faiths and religions, and everyone is welcome to take part. Flags decorated the kirtan area. 3 feet by 4 feet. They had been made by devotees, and each bore the symbol of a different religion. A bright red flag with a yellow star and the crescent moon of Islam flew from a 10-foot bamboo pole stuck into the earth. Well, the devotees didn't know that usually in the Muslim faith they use green, so they made it bright red. It's still beside it waved a pale blue flag with a dark blue Star of David in the center. That was for the Jewish faith, because these are the 3 most prominent religions in America. And beside that, a yellow flag bore the Sanskrit Omkara. Prabhupada's disciples, with their long hair and casual clothes, were indistinguishable from the other young dancers and singers, except for the strands of large red chanting beads around their necks. Some of the devotees danced with arms upraised against the background of uninterrupted blue sky. Others played instruments. The kartals and timpani were there. Not in this picture, we'll see other ones. Hayagriva had brought his coronet, that's like a trumpet. And there were other instruments brought by devotees and hippies. Little children were taking part. Even a stray dog pranced in the innermost circle of the kirtan party. On Sundays, the meadow beneath Hippie Hill was always an open show, and today the kirtan was the featured attraction. So these little children, they were born of the hippies, and they grew up in hippie life. They grew up just like their parents. And a lot of them, when their parents became devotees, they also were brought to the society. And that was when Prabhupada realized we have to have a Gurukula. So in 1972, Srila Prabhupada started the first Gurukula in Dallas, Texas, so that all these children who came to the movement with their parents could get a proper Krishna conscious education. Now there were several movies made, and Satsrup Maharaj, he wasn't there personally because he was in New York, but these movies that were made, he takes his descriptions from those movies, and just as in the movie you could see the dog going, weaving in and out amongst the devotees, you can see the children all sitting together, clapping. And what he did also, because when Satsrup Maharaj was writing Prabhupada left the planet, so he had assistants who would go to the places where Prabhupada had his pastimes, and they would make note of which trees were planted there, which flowers were blooming, the names of the streets, all of the details, so that when in this Prabhupada Lilamrita, the explicit description of Prabhupada's activities could be appreciated more. When Satsrup Maharaj wrote, he went from Frederick Street to Starmer and then to Warren, all these things, that came afterwards when he sent his assistants note, they sent different messages to Satsrup Maharaj. In this season, the Kadamba blooms, in this season the Malati blooms, in this season they're red roses. In this season, we didn't have red roses then. We only had these pink roses. And all of this was described to Satsvarup Maharaj so that he could put these details into the Lilamrita to paint a more realistic picture of Srila Prabhupada at each of the places. Prabhupada joined the kirtan. Walking up suddenly to the surprise and delight of the devotees, he sat down and began playing the mrdanga and leading the singing in a loud voice. Mukunda, he's remembering this. Although we had heard Swamiji play different drums before, and some of us had played along with him, when he played the clay mrdanga from India, it was a completely different feeling. The feeling it created was akin to seeing an old friend after many, many years. It was so right and so natural. It was the very thing our kirtans had been missing, and it increased our feelings of ecstasy many times over. Obviously, Swamiji was in greater ecstasy than ever. You could sense by the way he held the drum, by the ease with which he brought out its intricate rhythms to control the kirtan, that this drum was like a long-lost friend to him. Swamiji playing that drum was the talk of the community. Now we knew what kirtan really was, how it was supposed to sound, what it was really like. So this was from the early childhood of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's father, Gormohan Dey, insisted that Prabhupada learn mrdanga. And his mother, Rajani, objected. What good is this mrdanga playing? What good will it do him? She wanted Prabhupada to finish his studies in India, and then she wanted him to go to England to become a barrister. That was the mother's plan for Srila Prabhupada, Abai. But the father's plan was that he become an expert mrdanga player. And that's what made everything famous, the mrdanga playing. His father would fight that, no, I will not allow my son to become a mlecha. I will not let him go to London. So he won out. And fortunately, as a result of that, we now have ISKCON. Prabhupada was a center of attraction. Even his age and dress made him prominent. Whereas the others in the park were mostly young people dressed in denims, that's jeans, or various hippie costumes, Prabhupada was 70 and distinctly dressed in saffron robes. Prabhupada never compromised, never. Wherever he went, even when he went to Singapore, to Hong Kong, to places where he wasn't allowed in the country because he was a sannyasi, he still dressed as a sannyasi. Even though when they saw him, they said, no, you're not allowed here, and they sent him back. And then because in Singapore they wouldn't allow him to enter because he was dressed as a sannyasi. So then he went to Malaysia, which is right next to Singapore. And now in Malaysia we have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of devotees with so many temples. So this is how, by Krishna's arrangement, he got kicked out of Singapore, and as a result he opened up a whole other country, Malaysia, Indonesia, Bali, all these places next to Singapore. So Prabhupada, wherever he went, and that's why he had us, not at this time yet, but later, in a year or two, Prabhupada would have the devotees dress in saris and dhoti kurta. And that was how we went out on Sankirtan. Now, as mentioned, and you couldn't distinguish, aside from the red beads, you couldn't tell who was a hippie and who was a devotee. But Prabhupada changed that. And the reason he changed that was monumental. Because we all originally are with Krishna in the spiritual world. and we choose to leave him because we don't want to serve him, and we come here to the material world in forgetfulness, right? The coverings, kicking and covering of our consciousness. When people see the devotees dressed in sari and dhoti kurta with tilak, internally they remember Krishna and the spiritual world. So even just by dressing properly, even without speaking to people, you're also preaching. And that's why, at least in my own life, other devotees' lives also, we always maintain the Vaishnava dress. Because even if we can't speak to the people, just by their seeing us, that's preaching. They remember Krishna and the spiritual world. So Prabhupada, he set that perfect example, always dressed as a proper sannyasi. And the way the devotees had all cheered and bowed before him, and were now looking at him so lovingly, caused onlookers to regard him with curiosity and respect. As soon as he had sat down, some young children had gathered in close to him. He had smiled at them, deftly playing the mrdanga, enthralling and entertaining them with his playing. Govindadasi. You remember we heard about Govindadasi a few weeks ago, how she and her boyfriend joined. They were both artists. They had left Texas, the college in Texas, and come to Haight-Ashbury, looking for a guru, looking for a spiritual experience, and they found Srila Prabhupada. So she remembers. With Swamiji's arrival, there was a mastery and an authority about the whole kirtan that was absent before. We were no longer kids in San Francisco chanting Hare Krishna. Now we had historical depth and meaning. Now the kirtan had credentials. His presence established the ancient historical quality of the chanting. When Swamiji came, the whole disciplic succession came. And Prabhupada, he later confirmed that when he sent the devotees to London, he had first sent Kirtanananda to London, but Kirtanananda didn't do anything. He came back and started New Vrindavan. And then when he sent 3 couples, the same couples who opened up San Francisco, Shamasundar and Malati, Gurudas and Jamuna, and Mukunda and Janaki. He sent those 6 devotees to London, and they built a beautiful temple there on Soho Street. And Prabhupada had them make asans, vyasasans, because he said that when we have kirtan, Narada Muni comes to our kirtans. So there was an asan for Narada Muni, and the demigods also come. Everyone comes where there's kirtan. So here, now Prabhupada had arrived, and along with him, according to what Govindadasi experienced, the whole disciplic succession came along with him. These are the children, all gathered together, the hippie kids. After an hour of chanting, Prabhupada stopped the kirtan and addressed the crowd. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This is the sound vibration, and it is to be understood that the sound vibration is transcendental. And because it is transcendental vibration, therefore, it appeals to everyone. Even without understanding the language of the sound, this is the beauty. Even children respond to it. So naturally, seeing Srila Prabhupada, seeing his devout disciples surrounding him, these hippies were just completely mesmerized by the kirtan, and the children, they just naturally took part. It's explained in the Nectar Devotion, how children, even though they don't understand the philosophy, they can even come to states of ecstasy simply by chanting Hare Krishna. These are all shots from the movies that were made. After speaking 5 minutes, Prabhupada began the kirtan again. So here, he didn't even bother to speak half an hour. 5 minutes was enough for this group. One woman with long, uncombed red hair began dancing back and forth and chanting, her baby in her arms. So you can see all of these things. I didn't want to show the movies because most of it is the hippies gyrating and dancing very sensuously. So Satsrup Maharaj, he explains it for us in the Prabhupada Lilamrita. If you want to see them, they're very easily available. You just type Hippie Hill and 1967. You can see all these movies if you want to see a lot of hippies dancing. A man and woman sitting side by side played together on the heads of a pair of bongos. You can see that in the movie too. You can see the woman holding her baby. You can see the man on one side of the drum, the woman on the other side. Everything is there. And Satsrup Maharaj is describing it for us because he couldn't put the movie into the book. Subal, this is Subal. Remember, Subal had long hair, and Prabhupada insisted that he cut his hair for initiation. So Subal, in tight corduroy pants and a flowing white shirt, danced in a semblance of the step Swamiji had shown him, the Swami step, where you put one foot in front of the other, then the other foot in front of with your arms up, like Lord Chaitanya used to dance. The Swami step. Although Subal looked somewhat like an American Indian dancer. A little girl no more than 4 years old sat cross-legged, playing kartals and chanting seriously. A suave-looking fellow wearing a vest and round sunglasses played castanets against his palm. So all these things you'll see in the movies, because the movies are, some of them are half an hour, some of them are 17 minutes, some of them are 6 minutes. We'll go on with the reading. So this looks like a hippie. This is Rabindra Swarup, one of the first initiated disciples. You can tell he's a disciple because of his red beads. Rabindra Swarup sat rocking back and forth as he played the drone on the harmonium. Beside him, Hayagriva chanted forcefully, his head and upper body lunging forward and back, his long hair and beard jutting out wildly, while nearby a girl stood with her right arm around one boy and her left arm around another, all three of them swaying back and forth. Prabhupada was so tolerant. Singing with peaceful, blissful smiles, enjoying the chanting and the sunshine. One girl sat silently meditating, while beside her a girl danced provocatively, and a 5-year-old beside the dancing girl played with 2 balloons. Naturally, because the hippies believed in free love, children came out of this era, and here they were getting the opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada, to chant Hare Krishna, and many of them became devotees as a result of this. Prabhupada set his mrdanga aside and stood, playing kartals and swaying among the dancers, his feet moving in a stately measure. A big black man danced nearby, facing his white girlfriend, both of them moving as if they were at the Avalon, because the Avalon is it's a ballroom, it's a dance hall. So they were dancing together. We don't do that. Even Prabhupada once mentioned here that in the kirtan, we don't look at each other's faces during the kirtan. We look at the deities, because that's who we're playing the kirtan for. But these fortunate people who got to be with Srila Prabhupada, They didn't understand, so they were dancing together, although they were chanting Hare Krishna. The girl shook her body and head in wild abandon, and her long straight hair completely covered her face. Bright blonde Nandarani, there she is on the left, stood on Prabhupada's right, playing and simply observed the scene, his mouth closed in a stern yet sublimely tolerant expression. Can you just imagine for a moment Srila Prabhupada coming from Radha Damodar temple, now amidst being surrounded by hundreds of hippies who don't follow any regulative principles whatsoever. And here was Prabhupada on the order of his spiritual master introducing the holy names of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It was miraculous that Prabhupada was able to do this. Therefore, even he would look around and see the efficacy and the potency of the holy name, how all of these people just spontaneously were joining in the chanting of Hare Krishna. Some of the young people joined hands, forming a circle, and began to dance around and around in front of Swamiji. Then they encircled him, and as he looked on, still swaying and now clapping solemnly, they danced around him hand in hand, jumping and wriggling and chanting Hare Krishna. The soft pink hue of his khadi robes contrasting with the pied dress of the hippies. Pied means all different colors, some of them dressed like magicians, some of them all different types of hippie attire. Swamiji looked unusual and wonderful, watching and solemnly sanctioning the kirtan performance. Just so long as the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra was there, then everything was transcendental. Here's some of the circles that they made. The dancing was free-form and sensuous, but that was the way these young people expressed their feelings through their bodies. They didn't understand the philosophy, but the potency of the holy name was without any understanding. They were immediately chanting the holy name and dancing in ecstasy. They bounced and bounded into the air. Sometimes the circle of dancers would break and become a single line, weaving in and out among the people sitting on the grass, in and out among the silk flags. A muscular boy held the hand of a girl wearing long dark braids and a black headband in American Indian style. I didn't put that. It's there. It's all there in the movie if you want to see it. At the end of the line, a boy held a girl's hand with his left hand, while with his right, he held a wooden recorder. That means a wooden recorder is a flute that you play downwards, not sideways. They use that in America. To his mouth, and tooted as he weaved in and out of the crowd. So they were really enjoying this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, an opportunity to lose themselves in the transcendental sound vibration. There's the timpani behind Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada became tired and sat beside the brass-bottomed timpani. Singing and playing kartals, he sat grave and straight like an ancient sage. Nearby, a blonde woman sat in yogic posture, bending her body forward until her forehead touched the ground again and again in supplication or exhibition. They had no training, so the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it was bringing out transcendental feelings within them, but they didn't know how to express them properly. And that was what Prabhupada did. He taught us the proper ways to express ourselves through kirtan, by dancing properly, by playing musical instruments. But these were all new people, so they did the best they could. Another girl stretched out her hands imploringly in a mixed expression of inner feelings, physical and spiritual, while her golden earrings jangled. A Mexican in a checkered shirt beat a tom-tom, that's another kind of a drum. A white sheepdog wandered from person to person, big white dogs, as big as calves. Swamiji looked kind and amused. The hippies found him beautiful. He remained gentlemanly, aloof amid the twisting, shaking, rocking, dancing young people. Amid their most sensual movements, he appeared not at all like them, for he moved in a stately, elderly way. The devotees were watching Prabhupada. The others, it was their first experience possibly to see Prabhupada. The devotees, that was one wonderful thing about the devotees, their love for Prabhupada. They would watch what Prabhupada did, and not in a spirit of imitation, they would follow what Prabhupada did. So that way they learned how to perform the kirtans properly, just by watching Srila Prabhupada. As he surveyed the activities in the meadow, he seemed deeply pleased to see the ring of dancers singing all around, chanting. Although the enthusiasm of these hippies was often wild and sensual, the gathering assumed a wholesome sweetness due to the chanting of Hare Krishna. For Swamiji, the main thing was that the chanting was going on and on. Dressed in his saffron cloth that seemed to change colors subtly in the fading afternoon sunlight, he watched in a kindly, fatherly way, not imposing any restraint, but simply inviting everyone to chant Hare Krishna. So that was Srila Prabhupada's magic. He didn't impose upon people. He didn't force people. He once told me, force does not work. Prabhupada understood that in spiritual life, it has to be voluntary. We have to want to engage in spiritual activities. And the spiritual master trains us the proper way to engage. So Srila Prabhupada, he was perfectly happy. Whatever sensuous movements these young people were exposing him to, he was interested that they were chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra because he knew that they were getting purified that way. And later, they would learn from the devotees how to express themselves appropriately. 25-year-old Linda Katz was walking in the park when she heard the sound of the kirtan. So now Satsuru Maharaj is introducing a new to-be disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And at this point, she is called Linda Katz, and we'll read about her development. Maybe not fully tonight. In the crowd of hundreds of people gathered around the scene, Linda found it easy to go close without becoming conspicuous. She felt comfortable watching and even thought of joining the fun. Then she noticed the Swami leading the singing. She was startled, even a little frightened, having never before seen anyone so grave. He was striking. And the dancers appeared beautiful to her. A girl with arms upraised, eyes closed, seemed to be swinging like a tree in the wind. One of the men was tall and attractive, with golden curly hair. That sounds like Shamsundar Prabhu. And Linda saw a boy she knew from college in New York, a crazy boy who always wore a shocking pink wool cap. That's because from all over America, the young people were coming to this place of pilgrimage, the Mecca of the of the hippies. And here it was, right on Hippie Hill. So although Linda had come all the way from New York to have this experience She saw one of her college mates there, also at the kirtan. Linda had arrived in San Francisco from New York only a few days ago. She had no plans except to study under a certain dance teacher and maybe get into some of the exciting things she had heard were going on in Haight-Ashbury. As a graduate student in ancient Greek literature at Columbia University, Linda had become attracted to Socrates, who had lived and died for truth. But she hadn't found any of her professors to be at all like Socrates. She had envisioned herself living a life of truth by pursuing scholarship, but it had become dry. The ancient civilization of Greece was a dead idea, not a living truth. It didn't touch the heart. So Socrates, a few years later, Srila Prabhupada, sitting with some of his disciples, Shamsundar, Hayagriva, and others, the book was called, at that time, Dialectic Spiritualism. And it was a survey of the different philosophies from ancient times to present times in relation to Vedic culture. And Srila Prabhupada would point out the pros and the cons of each of the philosophy. And Prabhupada was also very affirmative about Socrates, because Socrates could understand that there is an absolute truth. In the time of the Greeks, the philosophy was that truth is relative. If you feel that something is true, then that's truth for you. But Socrates did not believe that. He believed that there was absolute truth that we have to seek in this life. So he spent his life seeking for that absolute nature. I picked out just one quote. We ought to believe that there is a mind diffused throughout the whole universe that disposes of all things according to its counsels. So Srila Prabhupada confirmed that Socrates was actually a devotee because he was seeking the absolute truth. And Prabhupada called him a Muni and a Gyanavan. Of course, then he quoted Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanavam Mam Prapadyante Vasudeva Saramiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. That yes, in that lifetime, he was able to understand the purpose of life, to seek out the absolute truth, but it would take many lifetimes for him to actually find that absolute truth. So we've gone over time, and we'll continue next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.